5 gunshots cut through the quiet of a Los Angeles hillside. Not a concert, not a movie set, not a drill. Just after 4:30 a.m., police lights flooded the street. A woman stood barefoot, bleeding. A gun lay inside an SUV, and inside that car were some of the most recognizable names in hip-hop. 2 years later, a courtroom would go silent. A jury foreman stood up, and with a single sentence, a career would collapse. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Tory Lanez was taken into custody immediately. Megan Thee Stallion sat still. No celebration, no relief. Just the weight of everything that had led to this moment. But here's the question that still divides millions. What really happened that night in July 2020? And how did a single argument spiral into a case that exposed the darkest corners of fame, loyalty, ego, and violence? Because this story didn't begin with gunfire. It began long before that, with 2 rising stars on completely different paths, both moving too fast, both surrounded by pressure, and both about to collide. And when they did, nothing would ever be the same. But to understand how it ended here, we have to go back. Before the headlines, before the trial, before the hashtags and the sides people chose, there was Megan Pete. Raised in Houston, Texas, a city where survival often comes before dreams. Megan grew up watching her mother, Holly Thomas, chase music while raising a daughter who learned early how fragile stability could be. Her father was gone. Her home life was unpredictable. And music wasn't a hobby, it was an escape. Megan was writing raps as a teenager, not for attention, not for clout, but because it gave her control over a world that often felt out of reach. Confidence became her armor. Lyrics became her weapon. But beneath the bravado was something else. Discipline, ambition, and a deep fear of being underestimated. At the same time, thousands of miles away, another story was forming. Daystar Peterson. The world would know him as Tory Lanez. Born in Canada, raised between countries. A childhood marked by instability and loss. When his mother died, everything changed. Tory bounced between homes, sometimes sleeping in cars. Music wasn't just an outlet, rival. He taught himself to rap, sing, record, and market. No safety net, no major cosigns at first, and that struggle hardened him. Independence became his identity. Defiance became his brand. But people close to him would later describe something else too. A volatile temper, insecurity masked by bravado, and a need to prove himself in every room he walked into. 2 artists, 2 different pasts, both chasing control in an industry that takes it away. And neither of them knew it yet, but fame was about to magnify everything, including the flaws. Before either of them became a headline. Before one was crowned a global superstar and the other a controversial figure. They were both chasing something deeper than fame. Control, validation, safety. Megan, confidence built from survival. Megan. Pete learned early that softness could be dangerous. Growing up in Houston, she watched her mother grind, juggling parenthood, music, and instability. Megan wasn't shielded from struggle. She lived inside it. And when you grow up like that, you adapt. Sharp with words, bold with presence, unapologetic by design. But behind the confidence was discipline. She stayed in school. She studied health administration. She planned for a future outside of rap because she knew fame was never guaranteed. That duality mattered. On one hand, she projected fearlessness. On the other, she carried caution. And those 2 sides would later collide in ways no one expected. Because the industry rewards confidence, but punishes vulnerability. And Megan was about to learn that lesson publicly. Tory. Hunger forged in instability. Tory Lanez's story moved differently. No stable home, no long-term safety, no second chances promised. When his mother died, the ground disappeared beneath him. Music wasn't just a dream, it was proof he existed, that he mattered, that he could rise without permission. He hustled relentlessly, recorded obsessively, promoted himself aggressively, and it worked. But that hunger came with something else: insecurity. People close to Tory would later describe a man who needed control of every room, a man who didn't handle disrespect well, a man who thrived when admired and unraveled when challenged. Success didn't calm that energy, it amplified it. And in an industry where ego is currency, that volatility often goes unchecked until it doesn't. Two worlds on a collision course. By the time Megan and Tory crossed paths, they weren't equals. Megan was ascending fast. Radio dominance, viral freestyles, major label backing, cultural momentum. Tory was established but restless, independent-minded, defensive of his status, constantly fighting for relevance in a shifting industry. Their connection wasn't built on balance. It was built on proximity. Late nights, industry circles, parties where status shifts by the minute. And in those environments, power dynamics blur. What starts as casual can turn complicated. What feels private becomes public. And what seems harmless can become combustible, especially when alcohol, pride, and unresolved trauma enter the room. And behind the scenes, cracks were already forming, because both of them carried something unresolved. Megan feared being dismissed. Tory feared being diminished. And neither of those fears responds well to conflict. Early warning signs that no one took seriously. There were moments people would later revisit, arguments that felt too intense, egos that clashed instead of aligned, energy that felt unpredictable. But in hip-hop culture, that's often normalized. Tempers are written off as passion, control is reframed as confidence, and warning signs get ignored until something breaks. No one thought it would break like this. Not that night. Not in that car, not with a gun involved. But the foundation was already unstable, and fame had turned the volume all the way up. Because next came the rise, and with it, money, power, influence, and pressure neither of them was prepared to handle. And once that pressure exploded, there was no turning back.
Fame didn't arrive quietly. It crashed in. No one could stop. By 2019, Megan Thee Stallion wasn't bubbling anymore. She was exploding. Freestyles went viral. Crowds finished her lyrics for her. Industry executives stopped calling. They started chasing. And then came the hits. Every release felt bigger than the last. Megan wasn't just charting, she was becoming a symbol. Confidence, independence, control. But here's the part people forget. Her rise happened fast. Too fast to process, too fast to protect herself, too fast to build boundaries. One moment she was grinding in Houston, the next she was navigating fame, contracts, loyalty tests, and power dynamics all at once. And success doesn't just elevate you, it isolates you. Suddenly, everyone wants access. Everyone has opinions. Everyone feels entitled to a piece of you. And Megan, still young, still grieving personal loss, still learning the industry, was expected to handle it flawlessly. Behind the scenes, pressure was stacking. And pressure always looks calm, right before it cracks. Success with an asterisk. Tory Lanez had already tasted fame. Hits,
tours, recognition, but his position felt unstable. The industry was shifting. New stars were arriving younger, louder, and faster. And independence, once his badge of honor, became a double-edged sword. Tory prided himself on being self-made, but self-made also means self-defensive. Every collaboration became a comparison. Every room became a competition. Every interaction a silent test of respect. And when Megan's star began to eclipse his, that dynamic changed everything. Suddenly, Tory wasn't the one being watched. He was the one being measured. And for someone whose identity was built on dominance and control,
when their worlds collided, Megan and Tory moved in the same spaces: industry parties, private events, late-night gatherings where power feels fluid and rules feel optional. From the outside, it looked casual, but inside that bubble, status matters. Who gets the attention? Who controls the energy? Who commands the room? And in those moments, subtle tensions surfaced. Not explosive, not obvious, just enough to feel off. Jokes that landed wrong, conversations that shifted tone, moments where admiration quietly turned into friction. No one wrote headlines about it, but these were the seeds, and they were being watered by alcohol, ego, and unresolved emotion. Foreshadowing the fall, there's a myth about fame, that money solves problems, that success stabilizes chaos. But in reality, fame magnifies everything. Confidence becomes arrogance. Insecurity becomes volatility. Small conflicts become dangerous. And neither Megan nor Tory had slowed down enough to notice what was building. Because when you're rising, you don't look down. You don't see the cracks forming beneath you. You just keep moving until something stops you. And for them, that moment was approaching fast. A single night, a single argument, a single decision that would turn success into scandal and fame into evidence. Because next came the tension. And after that, the point of no return. Success didn't destroy them overnight. It strained them first. Quietly, incrementally, in ways that only show themselves right before everything falls apart. Pressure changes behavior. By early 2020, both Megan and Tory were moving at full speed. Tours, industry appearances, late nights stitched together by exhaustion and adrenaline. And with that pace came something dangerous: friction without rest. Arguments didn't have time to cool. Emotions didn't have space to settle. Everything stayed hot. People around them noticed shifts, energy that felt unpredictable, moments that felt unnecessarily intense, reactions that didn't match the situation. But in their world, chaos was normal, and normalizing chaos is how warning signs get ignored. Emotional volatility behind closed doors. What the public saw was polish. What happened behind closed doors was messier, conversations that escalated quickly, misunderstandings fueled by ego and insecurity, alcohol lowering the barrier between impulse and action. This wasn't unique. It's common in environments where power, status, and pride collide, especially when no one wants to be perceived as weak. For Megan, asserting boundaries mattered. For Tory, feeling challenged hit deeper. And when those needs collided, tension followed. Not explosive yet, just sharp enough to cut. Media pressure turns up the heat. By 2020, Megan's visibility had multiplied. Every appearance was analyzed, every move debated, every interaction clipped, reposted, and dissected. That kind of attention doesn't just elevate, it surveils. And for the people around her, that spotlight created pressure too. Being near her meant being compared to her. And comparison is rarely neutral. It breeds resentment, it breeds defensiveness, it breeds moments where pride overrides judgment, especially when alcohol is involved, especially when status feels threatened. Relationship fractures. No one wanted to address. Inside their circle, dynamics were shifting. Trust felt thinner, communication felt sharper, silence felt heavier. Small disagreements didn't stay small, they stacked, and every unresolved moment added weight to the next one. But no one pressed pause. No one stepped back. Because in that world, stopping looks like losing, and losing wasn't an option. The final warnings. Here's the part that's hardest to sit with. Nothing that happened next came completely out of nowhere. There were moments that could have been turning points, opportunities to leave early, to cool down, to create distance. But momentum is deceptive. It convinces you that you're still in control, right up until the moment you aren't. And on a warm July night in Los Angeles, all of that pressure followed them into a car, an argument, a confrontation, a moment where emotions outpaced reason. And then, everything changed. Because the next act isn't about warning signs, it's about gunfire. And once that sound echoes, there's no rewinding what comes after. July 12th, 2020, Los Angeles, California. It's late, past midnight. The city is quieter than it was hours earlier, but the night is still alive. A group leaves a party in the Hollywood Hills. From the outside, nothing looks unusual. No shouting, no flashing cameras, no sense that history is about to be written. Inside the SUV are 4 people: Megan Thee Stallion, Tory Lanez, Megan's friend, Kelsey Harris, and a bodyguard. What happens next will later be argued, dissected, and replayed in a courtroom, frame by frame, without a single piece of video capturing the most important moment. Only voices, only testimony, only fragments of memory. The argument, what is known. At some point during the drive, an argument begins. That much is not disputed. According to testimony presented later in court, tensions rise inside the vehicle. Words are exchanged. Emotions escalate. The reasons given differ. Prosecutors would later describe the argument as stemming from personal and professional tensions. The defense would offer alternate explanations. What matters here is this: the situation inside the car deteriorates, and it does so quickly. The vehicle stops. The SUV pulls over on a residential street. What happens next becomes the center of the entire case. Megan exits the vehicle. This is confirmed. Why she exits and what is said in that moment is described differently depending on who is speaking. But moments later, gunfire erupts. The shots, 5 shots. Not one, not a warning pop, not an accident that goes unnoticed. 5. The sound echoes through the quiet street. Neighbors hear it. Police are called. And Megan is injured. Later medical reports confirm. She was shot in the feet. Bullet fragments were removed surgically. The injuries were real, physical, and documented. This is not in dispute. Courtroom testimony. During the trial, Megan testifies that Tory Lanez fired the weapon and told her to dance as shots were fired. This statement becomes one of the most widely reported and most contested moments of the entire case. The defense disputes this account, but the jury hears it, and it lands heavily because it reframes the shooting not as chaos, but as intentional humiliation paired with violence. Whether viewers accept or reject that framing becomes a dividing line. But in the courtroom, it is treated as sworn testimony. The silence that followed. After the shots, something unexpected happens. There is no immediate public accusation, no viral video, no press conference, no social media explosion. Instead, there is silence. When police arrive, Megan initially tells officers she was injured by broken glass. Later, she would explain why. Fear, shock, distrust of police, the instinct to protect herself and others in a moment she didn't fully understand yet. That decision would follow her for years, because silence, once broken, is always questioned. The arrest police search the vehicle. They find a firearm. Tory Lanez is arrested that night for carrying a concealed weapon. Not for shooting. Not yet. The gravity of what just happened hasn't fully crystallized, but the damage is already done. Because by sunrise, this isn't just an argument anymore. It's a crime scene, the moment that can't be undone. There is a line in every true crime story, a moment where everything before it still had options, and everything after it does not. This was that moment. 5 shots erased deniability. 5 shots turned tension into trauma. 5 shots guaranteed that silence wouldn't last. And when the truth finally emerged, it wouldn't just divide a jury.
It would divide a culture. The gunshots fade, but the damage doesn't. The hours after Megan is treated for her injuries, surgery removes bullet fragments from her feet. That fact is medical, documented, undeniable. But publicly, almost nothing is said. No accusation, no explanation, just confusion. And in the absence of answers, something far more dangerous takes over: speculation. Why she stayed silent. When Megan eventually explains why she didn't immediately name the shooter, her reasoning is simple and controversial. Fear, shock, and distrust of police in a moment where everything felt unstable. She later says she was trying to protect herself and others while still processing what had happened. But silence, once broken, becomes a weapon. Because the longer she waited, the louder the doubt grew. The internet picks sides. Within days, social media does what it always does. It chooses teams. Some people believe Megan immediately. Others don't believe her at all. Old videos are replayed. Past lyrics are misused as evidence. Her confidence is reframed as dishonesty, and a dangerous question starts trending. Why would he shoot her? As if violence requires permission. As if harm only counts when it makes sense to outsiders. The narrative fractures, and once that happens, truth becomes harder to hear. Megan breaks her silence. In August 2020, Megan speaks publicly. She confirms she was shot. She names Tory Lanez. And the moment she does, the backlash intensifies. Because now, this isn't just a crime story. It's a cultural flashpoint. Gender, power, misogyny, fame, everything collapses into one argument. And Megan becomes the center of it. Not just as a victim, but as a target. The music as a message. Tory Lanez responds, not in court, but through music. Lyrics deny responsibility, question motives, suggest alternate versions of events. He doesn't confess. He doesn't apologize. He challenges the narrative. And for his supporters, that's enough. Because in hip-hop culture, confidence is often mistaken for truth. And repetition turns denial into belief. Two stories, one reality. At this point, there are two competing versions of the same night. One says Megan was shot by Tory Lanez. The other says she wasn't, or that someone else was responsible. Evidence exists, testimony exists, but online, perception outweighs proof. And that matters, because by the time charges are filed, public opinion is already hardened. Lines are drawn, and no matter what happens in court, millions of minds are already made up. The case becomes inevitable. In October 2020, prosecutors formally charge Tory Lanez. The story crosses a line. From controversy to criminal case. From internet debate to courtroom consequences. But the trial is still far away. And in the time between accusation and judgment, the pressure only builds. Because now, everything said or not said will be replayed under oath. And when that happens, only one version of the truth can survive. By December 2022, the internet goes quiet. Not because the arguments are over, but because they don't matter here anymore. Inside a Los Angeles courtroom, there are no hashtags, only evidence, only testimony. Only 12 people who weren't online that night, but now have to decide what happened. The stakes are set. Tory Lanez sits at the defense table. He's facing 3 felony charges. Assault with a semi-automatic firearm, carrying a loaded, unregistered firearm, discharging a firearm with gross negligence. The consequences are real. Prison time, career-ending consequences, a permanent record that fame can't erase. The prosecution goes first, and they don't open with emotion. They open with sequence, reconstructing the night. Jurors are walked through the timeline, the party, the drive, the argument, the stop. They hear about the gun recovered from the vehicle, gunshot residue testing, Witness statements made in the immediate aftermath. Nothing flashy, just methodical reconstruction. Because the case doesn't hinge on whether Megan was injured. That part is uncontested. It hinges on who fired the gun and why. Megan takes the stand. When Megan Thee Stallion testifies, the room changes. Not because she's famous, but because this is the first time she tells the story without filters. She describes the argument, the moment she exits the vehicle, the shots. She tells jurors that Tory Lanez fired the weapon. She describes being told to dance as the shots rang out. She talks about fear, not just of being shot, but of speaking up afterward. At one point, she says something that cuts through the room, that she wishes she had died that night, because living through the aftermath was worse. The defense cross-examines her aggressively. They question inconsistencies. They point to delays in reporting. They probe motives. But Megan doesn't retreat. She doesn't embellish. She stays with the facts as she remembers them. And the jury watches closely. Because credibility is built in moments like this. The defense's alternate story. The defense offers a different version of events. They argue that Tory Lanez did not fire the gun. They suggest another person in the vehicle may have been responsible. They point to gaps, contradictions, unclear moments in the chaos. It's not about proving who did do it. It's about creating reasonable doubt. And for a moment, that strategy holds. Because chaos creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is the defense's ally. A key witness under pressure. Then comes testimony from Megan's friend, Kelsey Harris. Her statements are scrutinized. Past comments, messages, moments where memory appears unclear. The defense presses hard, but under questioning, she does not take responsibility for the shooting and, crucially, she does not exonerate Tory Lanez. The narrative tightens, and the room feels it. The closing arguments. Both sides rest. The prosecution emphasizes patterns, text messages, witness statements, physical evidence, behavior after the incident. They argue this wasn't an accident. It was reckless, intentional, and criminal. The defense returns to doubt. No video, no confession, conflicting memories. They remind jurors that doubt, not certainty, is enough. Then the jury disappears. The wait. Hours pass, then days. Speculation returns, but now it's muted, because the decision is no longer theoretical. It's sealed behind a closed door. And when the jury returns, no one breathes. The verdict. The four-person stands. Count 1, guilty. Count 2, guilty. Count 3, guilty. Tory Lanez is taken into custody immediately. No speech, no performance, just consequence. Megan sits still, not triumphant, not relieved, just finished. Because winning a case like this doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving. The verdict ends the trial. It does not end the story. Because the real weight of what happened doesn't land in a courtroom. It lands afterward. When the doors close, the cameras shut off, and everyone has to live with what remains. The sentence. Months later, sentencing arrives. The arguments return briefly. The prosecution describes harm, not just physical injury, but psychological damage, public humiliation, and years of denial. The defense asks for mercy, points to past success, to charity, to the idea that prison will not fix what's already broken. But the judge is not weighing fame, only impact. Tory Lanez is sentenced to 10 years in prison.
The room absorbs it quietly. No outburst, no celebration, just the sound of a future being sealed. What prison can't undo. Incarceration doesn't rewind time. It doesn't erase the gunshots. It doesn't undo the surgery. It doesn't return the years Megan spent defending her own reality. And it doesn't restore the career Tory Lanez once had. Music releases slow. Collaborations disappear. Support fractures. Some fans remain loyal, others walk away. Because prison doesn't just confine bodies, it freezes momentum. Megan. After the verdict. For Megan, the case ends, but the trauma doesn't. She continues releasing music, touring, winning awards. From the outside, it looks like resilience, but resilience often hides cost. She speaks about anxiety, about trust, about what it means to survive something the world debated like entertainment. Because she didn't just have to prove she was shot, she had to prove she was believable. And that battle leaves scars no verdict can heal. A culture forced to look at itself. This case exposed something deeper than a single crime. It exposed how quickly victims are doubted, especially when they are women, especially when they are black, especially when they are powerful. It showed how music can be used as defense, distraction, or denial, and how audiences often confuse confidence with innocence. The trial didn't just ask who fired the gun, it asked, who do we believe and why? What does accountability look like when fame is involved? And how much proof does someone need before their pain counts? The uncomfortable questions that remain. There is no alternate ending here. No twist that makes everyone right. Only facts, consequences, and unresolved discomfort. Could this have been avoided? Probably. Would it have mattered if the internet had waited for evidence instead of choosing sides? We'll never know. Does justice feel satisfying or just necessary? That depends on who's watching. The final image. A quiet street in Los Angeles. No police lights now. No crowd. No headlines. Just a place where 5 gunshots once changed 2 lives forever. One person serving time, another carrying memory, and a culture left to decide what it learned, if anything at all. Because this story wasn't just about a shooting, it was about power, pride, belief, and consequence. And the most unsettling truth, the next time it happens, the questions will sound familiar.